A famous father can still fill magazine covers, still walk red carpets, still open every festival with a smile, and at the very same time, his own children can be quietly erasing him from their lives. That contradiction is the real subject of this story. Not a scandal with a tidy verdict, but a paper trail, court filings, an FBI report, a leaked private post, and a pattern that becomes impossible to unsee once you notice it. Here is what the record actually shows. A small town beginning. William Bradley Pitt was born on the 18th of December, 1963, in Oklahoma. His family soon relocated to Springfield, Missouri, where he grew up alongside two younger siblings in a conservative Southern Baptist household, the kind where church wasn't a Sunday appointment but the organizing center of daily life. In 1982, he enrolled at the University of Missouri to study journalism, then dropped out one semester short of graduation, later saying he wanted to try acting instead. He moved to Los Angeles to chase it. What rarely makes it into the polished biographies is what came next. Roughly 2 years of working as a house sitter, a pool attendant, a driver for other people, taking acting classes on the side and picking up uncredited extra work that only got added to his resume retroactively, once he was already famous. The real break wasn't talent discovered on a stage. It was a writer on the soap opera Another World, a man who let the young Pitt stay at his home and then wrote a role specifically so Pitt could qualify for his union cards, the credentials without which no one can book professional work in Hollywood. It's a chicken and egg problem. You need the card to get the role, and the role to get the card. That writer broke the cycle for him. Pitt flew to New York, filmed the episode, secured his cards, and the show's producers, unimpressed, never called him back. In his early years, Pitt occasionally credited the man who'd opened that door. He hasn't mentioned him in decades. When that same person later tried to reconnect, even sending Pitt a script he'd written, he couldn't get through. It's the first pattern worth flagging here. People who open doors tend to vanish from the story once they're no longer useful. The Ascent. With his union cards in hand, the work came quickly. 21 Jump Street, head of the class, Growing Pains alongside a young Leonardo DiCaprio. The actors who dominate cinema for the next 3 decades were, in the 1980s, crossing paths on the sets of forgettable television, building careers one small job at a time. 1991 brought the first real breakthrough, Thelma and Louise, small enough to get noticed. A River Runs Through It followed in 1992. Then, in 1994, Interview with the Vampire alongside Tom Cruise, the very film that writer had lent him years earlier as a book, one Pitt reportedly hadn't cared for at the time. It became the role that launched him. From there it was one hit after another. Legends of the Fall, 7, opposite Gwyneth Paltrow, whom he dated and briefly got engaged to afterward. 12 Monkeys, which won him his first Golden Globe in 1996. Meet Joe Black. And closing out the decade, Fight Club, arguably still his most iconic role. What ran alongside the career? Behind the public trajectory, a second, quieter story was developing. From early in his career, on-set rumors about Pitt carried a specific flavor: difficult, temperamental, sharp when drinking, hard on crew members, never on producers or directors, always on the people with no power to say no. Years later, second-hand accounts tied to the filming of Moneyball would describe a set where Pitt wasn't just difficult himself but reportedly encouraged others to behave the same way. There's also a detail almost never included in career retrospectives. Before Jennifer Aniston, Pitt dated his California co-star Juliette Lewis, who was 16 and 17 during the relationship while he was 25 and 26. He later dated Christina Applegate, also 16 and 17 at the time, while he was around 27. Applegate has referenced this herself in her own memoir. It isn't rumor, it's something the people involved have put on record, and it's something that consistently disappears whenever a glossy profile gets written. Brangelina, built to order. By the close of the 1990s, Pitt was one of the most recognizable faces on the planet. So separately was Jennifer Aniston, then the biggest name on television thanks to Friends. Their relationship becoming public was a genuine global event. Their wedding in the year 2000 landed on every cover in existence. Together they founded the production company Plan B, which would later become central to Pitt's career as a producer behind acclaimed projects like 12 Years a Slave. The marriage began unraveling in 2004. That year Pitt had 3 films going simultaneously: Troy, Ocean's 12, and Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and it was on the set of the last one that he met, worked with, and apparently grew close to Angelina Jolie. The role had originally been offered to Nicole Kidman. Pitt stepped away from the project citing his workload and a lack of chemistry with her. Once Kidman exited and Jolie took the part, Pitt rejoined almost immediately. What followed on set matched what everyone already suspected. Paparazzi photos of Pitt and Jolie holding hands began circulating, met by a publicity team explanation that they were simply in character. Few believed it. In January of 2005, Pitt and Aniston vacationed in Mexico with friends. Photographers caught them on the beach, Pitt reportedly wearing a shirt that read "trash," in what looked at the time like the moment the couple broke the separation news to their friends. What seemed then like a striking coincidence reads differently now, with a fuller understanding of how top-tier celebrity publicity operates. Days after that trip, the split was announced. Aniston filed for divorce in March of 2005, and before that divorce was even finalized, in October of that year, Pitt and Jolie appeared in an elaborately staged magazine photo spread. Dozens of images, the two of them styled as a 1950s family, complete with children, a picture-perfect home, total domestic bliss. All of it choreographed while Pitt's divorce was still legally pending. The Brangelina myth was manufactured from day one. The family grew quickly. Jolie had already adopted her son from Cambodia before her relationship with Pitt became official. Pitt formally adopted him once they were together. A daughter came from Ethiopia, a son from Vietnam. A biological daughter arrived in 2006, and twins in 2008. 6 children total between 2002 and 2008, each arrival treated as international news. Photos of one daughter's birth reportedly sold for $1.5 million, donated to charity. Photos of the twins reportedly went for $14 million, also donated. In 2014, after roughly a decade together, the couple married at their French estate, Chateau Miraval, a property that will matter a great deal later in this story. From the outside, the image was flawless. Major actors, major producers, philanthropists, a sprawling international family. From the inside, accounts from the later years of the marriage describe something else. Persistent stories about Pitt's on-set behavior, about drinking, about outbursts of anger, from people who worked near him during that period and described someone growing more volatile over time. One more episode from that era is worth noting. Pitt was involved in a post-Hurricane Katrina housing project in New Orleans. Not charity, but an investment. The homes were built quickly and cheaply, and many soon proved close to uninhabitable, leaving storm victims effectively victimized twice, with some of the funding drawn from public money. Lawsuits followed. This, too, tends to be absent from the flattering profiles. The plane. On the 14th of September, 2016, Jolie and Pitt were at Chateau Miraval with all 6 children, ranging in age from 8 to 15, preparing to fly home to Los Angeles on a private jet. What happened on that flight isn't rumor or anonymous sourcing. It's documented in an FBI report and in a countersuit Jolie later filed against Pitt, both formal legal records with dates and signatures. The countersuit describes in detail an altercation that reportedly began even before the family reached the airport, with Pitt confronting one of the children. Once airborne, the filing alleges Pitt grew verbally aggressive toward Jolie when she asked what was wrong, then later pulled her into the plane's bathroom, shook her, shoved her against a wall, and struck the ceiling with his fist. When one of the children asked Jolie if she was okay and Pitt reportedly shouted back that she wasn't, he allegedly began yelling at Jolie in front of the children. When one child spoke up in her defense, the filing alleges Pitt lunged at his own son, and that Jolie pulled him back, injuring her own back and elbow in the process. The children, according to the filing, were terrified, tried to shield one another, and at one point Pitt allegedly grabbed one child by the throat and struck another in the face. Several children reportedly begged him to stop. To avoid provoking him further, the family allegedly hid under a blanket in silence, afraid even to use the bathroom, while Pitt periodically emerged to shout and swear at them, at one point pouring beer on Jolie and, in another instance, beer and red wine on the children. He eventually fell asleep. On landing, when Jolie told him she and the children were heading to a hotel, the filing alleges he became furious again and kept the entire family on the plane for roughly 20 minutes before one of the children insisted they be let out. Even on the tarmac, the filing alleges further physical aggression toward one child and toward Jolie, until a child's plea caused him to stop. 5 days later, on the 19th of September, 2016, Jolie filed for divorce. One detail matters enormously here. It wasn't Jolie who alerted authorities. It was the flight crew, professionals whose entire job depends on discretion, who reported what they'd witnessed to the FBI. The agent who led the investigation ultimately found probable cause to refer the matter for federal prosecution. Pitt was never charged. That outcome isn't as unusual as it sounds. Fewer than 1 in 10 reported assault cases in the United States result in any charge at all, and only a small fraction of those produce a real legal outcome. Jolie also kept the matter sealed for years, reportedly to shield her minor children from public exposure. Details only became widely known once related litigation surfaced publicly around 2019. What followed the flight was one of the longest and most opaque divorce processes in recent memory, roughly 8 years, concluding in December of 2024. The couple used a private judge to keep proceedings sealed, a practice increasingly common among celebrities. That judge was eventually removed from the case over undisclosed business ties to Pitt's team, a documented conflict of interest. Much of the custody record remains sealed, but the visible outlines are telling. Reporting indicated the children were reluctant to see Pitt, visits were supervised, and as each child turned 18, custody simply stopped being a legal question. They became adults free to choose for themselves, and they did. The marriage was formally dissolved in December of 2024. A separate legal dispute over Chateau Miraval remains ongoing, with a trial currently scheduled for February of 2027. Managing the narrative. In 2016, right as the plane incident and the divorce filing became public, coverage of Pitt shifted. The story stopped being the incident, the FBI inquiry, or the divorce, and became instead a story about Pitt as the victim, a devastated man wronged by a cold, calculating Jolie who had supposedly been secretly plotting to take the children. Real headlines from that period, in outlets like US Weekly, describe her plan to destroy Brad, Pitt begging for time with his kids over the holidays, Brad's hell, and Jolie supposedly waging psychological warfare using the children as weapons. Only one side of that story was actively talking to the press, because Jolie has never employed a publicity apparatus the way Pitt has, and that asymmetry explains much of what followed. The strategist widely credited with running Pitt's media response is Matthew Hiltzik, one of Hollywood's most prominent crisis publicity operators, whose client list includes other figures tied to major scandals that dominated headlines for years. The playbook is fairly consistent. First attempt a reconciliation narrative, then pivot to victimhood when that fails, then flood the press with distraction stories, a new relationship, a new project, a meaningful glance across a room at an old flame. That's roughly what happened as details from the flight began surfacing. Suddenly there were stories everywhere speculating about a possible reunion between Pitt and Aniston. Every time they appeared at the same event and happened to make eye contact, a wave of articles followed the next day. Coverage of an FBI inquiry into an alleged child strangling incident got buried under speculation about an ex-wife from 2 decades earlier. There's a darker layer here too, involving one of Pitt and Jolie's daughters. While she was still a minor, headlines repeatedly used her name to build a narrative that she, uniquely among the children, still wanted a relationship with her father. Stories with titles suggesting she'd been turned into her mother's enemy, forced into court appearances, and was pleading for her father to save her. She turned 18 on the 27th of May, 2024. That same day, she filed to drop the surname Pitt. What the children have said, and haven't. None of the 6 children have ever given an interview discussing their father. None have spoken on camera about him in recent years. But the record isn't entirely silent. In 2019, one of the sons, then studying in South Korea, was approached by a reporter who asked whether Pitt planned to visit him at university. He said he didn't know what was happening. Asked whether his relationship with his father had ended, he replied only, "Whatever happens, happens," vague, but telling in context. Then there's a private social media post from another son, published on Father's Day in 2020 and later leaked to the press. Posted to a closed account meant only for friends and family, it showed a photo of Pitt accepting his Oscar for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, with a caption reading, in substance, that Pitt had repeatedly shown himself to be a cruel, contemptible person with no regard for the younger children who still feared him, that he would never grasp the harm he'd caused because he was incapable of it, that he'd made the people his son loved most live through ongoing torment, and that whatever story Pitt told himself or the public, the truth would eventually surface, closing with a pointed Happy Father's Day to, as the post put it, a horrible human being. That isn't a lawyer's statement or an anonymous source. It's a son, in his own words, telling his father exactly what he thinks of him. And notably, the post centers less on what was done to him personally and more on what happened to his siblings, how they visibly feared their father's presence. Then there's the matter of surnames. One daughter filed her legal petition on the 27th of May 2024, the day she turned 18. The Los Angeles court approved it in August of that year, making her legal name reflect only her mother's surname. Her first act as a legal adult, taken the very day she was able to take it. Another daughter enrolled at Spelman College in November of 2023 under her mother's surname alone. A third appeared credited under just her mother's surname in a Broadway production she worked on as a production assistant. One of the sons was credited with only his mother's surname in a 2026 film, after previously appearing under both parents' names. Only one of these changes has been legally confirmed. The others remain informal, public-facing choices. But the pattern speaks for itself, given the choice of how to present themselves to the world in a college directory. In film credits, on a Broadway playbill, 4 of 6 children have chosen to use only their mother's name. The 2 youngest twins haven't yet had the same opportunity to choose publicly. Their story is still being written. The Vineyard fight. Chateau Miraval, the roughly $164 million Provence estate the couple bought together and where they married in 2014, remains the most active legal battlefield between them. The story most widely reported is a simple one. Jolie tried to cash out her stake behind Pitt's back, sold to a rival, and left him stuck in a business partnership he never wanted. What the actual legal filings describe is considerably more complicated. In 2021, with the divorce already 5 years unresolved, Jolie sought to sell her share and, per their agreement, offered Pitt's team the right of first refusal. The 2 sides negotiated a price of $54.5 million and by February of that year had a completed agreement, pending only a signature. Pitt never signed. In April, his team sent a revised proposal at the identical price, but with one addition: a new non-disclosure agreement, not limited to the wine business, requiring Jolie to agree never to speak negatively about the estate, its shareholders, or specifically, Pitt himself in any context. Jolie's team countered reasonably, proposing the NDA apply equally to both parties and be limited to the business relationship. Silence. A follow-up in May got the same offer again, then more silence. A deadline notice went unanswered. In June, Pitt's team sent an even broader version of the NDA, one that, according to the filings, would have barred Jolie from ever discussing, outside of a courtroom, any alleged abuse by Pitt toward her or the children, structured so that Pitt's personal conduct was tied to the business itself, making any statement about the alleged abuse a breach of a commercial agreement. In effect, sell me your share, and in exchange, stay silent about what happened permanently. Jolie declined. By June of 2022, the deal was dead. She found another buyer, notified Pitt's team, and completed the sale. Pitt sued her over it. That case is set for trial in February of 2027, and if it follows the pattern of the last decade, expect a media campaign beforehand that makes the 2016 tabloid coverage look restrained by comparison. Business as usual. Through all of this, Pitt's public career never slowed. A Formula One film released in 2025 became a genuine box office phenomenon, earning several $100 million worldwide on a modest budget, with Pitt starring and producing. Red carpets, festival stops, the standard press circuit followed. He's since attached to a film about the Isle of Man TT, one of the most dangerous motorcycle races in the world. A widely watched Netflix series from 2025 lists him as a producer. Plan B remains a serious player in the industry. And in interviews, when the past comes up, the drinking, the difficult years, Pitt has a well-rehearsed answer, most visibly in a lengthy podcast conversation where he framed alcoholism as the central villain of his story, a former self he now views with hard-won understanding. It's worth being precise about that framing, because it circulates widely and invites a convenient misreading. Everyone makes mistakes, that's not in dispute. But alcoholism does not on its own turn someone violent, and it doesn't transform a person into someone capable of, say, grabbing a child by the throat or shoving a spouse against a wall on an airplane. Millions of people struggle with substance use without anyone in their orbit experiencing anything like what's described in that FBI filing. Plenty of sober people, meanwhile, behave exactly this way every day of their lives. It was the alcohol narrative does something specific. It takes a documented pattern of behavior and repackages it as a closed chapter. I had a problem, I'm better now, that's not who I am anymore. It's a tidy, sympathetic exit from an uncomfortable subject. But the FBI documentation doesn't describe a single alcohol-fueled lapse. It describes hours of sustained aggression, a family effectively confined against their will, a period of sleep, and then a return to aggressive behavior upon waking, which raises a fair question about how long an alcohol excuse is supposed to cover. During roughly the same period those redemption arc interviews were running, coverage of Pitt's new relationship multiplied. Dozens of stories about how it had healed him, changed him, helped him leave old habits behind. It's the same reputation management cycle, running in real time. Don't look over there, look at this instead. Where that leaves things. To recap what's actually on the record, an FBI investigation that found probable cause for federal charges and still declined to prosecute. Signed legal filings describing in specific detail What happened aboard a private plane carrying children between the ages of 8 and 15? A $54.5 million sale rejected because it wasn't paired with an NDA meant to silence an ex-spouse about alleged abuse. 6 children, at least 4 of whom have, when given the choice, publicly opted to use only their mother's surname. One who changed her name legally on the first day she legally could. Another who wrote his father words, in a private post that leaked, that need no further interpretation. And a man who continues to appear on magazine covers as though none of it happened. That gap between the public image and the private record isn't a mystery. It has a price tag. It costs millions of dollars a year in publicity management, in friendly interviews, in strategically timed stories about old flames and new relationships and redemption arcs. The quieter, harder-to-see version of this story isn't visible from the outside at all. It's visible in the children who don't call, in the surname one of them dropped the day she turned 18, and in the image of kids at 30,000 feet pulling a blanket over their heads so they wouldn't have to look at their own father. A trial over the Chateau Miraval dispute is scheduled for February of 2027. When it arrives, expect the same playbook: distraction stories, feel-good profiles, talk of growth and new projects, a well-timed glance at an old flame. At least now it's clearer where to look.